Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite music, movies, TV shows, and more. We are your steely knives of scintilla, your two Tiffany-twisted minds of minutia, prisoners here of our own device. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. And I have to say, I had no idea they were saying Tiffany Twisted in that song. I don't even know what that means. I imagine you'll tell me later.
Re-listening to all this, I've actually discovered that the thing I like best about this song are the lyrics. Shocking.
That makes sense. I can see that.
And as our keen-eared listeners may have gleaned from that intro, Jordan, today we are gathering in our master's chambers for a feast of facts. Voices waking you up in the middle of the night, or whenever you might listen to this, to talk about the Eagles Hotel California. Love them or hate them, and as I've learned from our reviews on Apple Podcasts, my feelings about boomer music icons are not frequently appreciated.
Wildly dislikable boomer music icons, I need to say.
That's true.
For risk of getting more of those.
Yeah. Whatever. Don Henley's quotes speak for himself.
Yeah.
The Eagles are just one of the biggest bands, period. And Hotel California is their biggest song. So, good for them.
Just want to add that discussing the Eagles right now is, if listeners can probably tell, making you physically ill.
Yeah, I'm a little sick of Don Henley. Yeah, I don't know, man. You have a bit more of a parlor fascination with the iconography and everything around them. I just really love Joe Walsh.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to love? Yeah, no, we have numerous Joe Walsh corner moments in here, so yeah.
Thank God.
My fascination with the Eagles extends way beyond the music. The tumultuous interpersonal dynamics and the interband drama, for me, put them neck and neck with Fleetwood Mac in terms of just being the most entertaining and grossing rock and roll soap opera. In a previous podcast I co-hosted about rock rivalries, the Eagles story spiraled into an epic trilogy. So it's Titanic levels in the TMI universe.
I mean, I don't know, dude. Is it like I want to get one of those T-shirts that like Detroit versus everybody. That's like Don Henley versus everybody, or like all my homies hate Don Henley. That'd be another good one.
But, despite our strongly held feelings, I know people I consider friends, who have equally strong feelings for the Eagles in the opposite way. They love the Eagles. I mean, the gargantuan sales figures speak for themselves.
Numbers don't lie,
Yeah. In the United States, the Eagles have the first and third highest selling albums ever. Their greatest hits album is number 1. Hotel California is number 3, forming a sandwich with Michael Jackson's Thriller at number 2. That's a sandwich I don't like. The Eagles is the bread, Michael Jackson is the meat.
Ooh, Michael Jackson and meat should never be in the same sentence together. Yeah, I don't know, man. You know what it is to me? I think they really crystallized with doing the research and having to read these guys talk a bunch is they have sore winner energy, They made more money making music than probably anyone will again. Like just purely from music. Because, I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder how rich these guys are. And the reason that they probably aren't as rich as Michael Jackson or your Taylor Swifts or whatever is because, to their credit, they didn't do endorsements, they didn't do commercials, they didn't license their stuff, but they have the first and third best-selling records of all time. Like, so you won, guys, and all they can do is keep like relitigating the same petty grievances and like the same
relitigating in a literal sense very often, by the way. Yeah,
and it's like. It's one thing to be a sore winner if you're like funny and engaging, but it's another thing to be like a cantankerous old man. It's a bad look. It's just they're just personally unlikable people, except for Sweet Joe Walsh.
Oh yes, and Randy Meisner.
Oh God, yeah. I didn't know that about Randy Meisner. That was a surprise read. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But good Lord.
No. As the honorary boomer in our little duo, I know better than to criticize these golden boys of the me decade too much. So allow me to quote the self-proclaimed dean of rock critics, Robert Christgau. In 1972, he writes, "Another thing that interests me about the Eagles is that I hate them."
One of the best pieces of rock criticism of all time.
Yes, yes. This is just one of the many ways that I am like the dude from The Big Lebowski. My intense antipathy towards the Eagles, despite what I really believe to be their sizable degree of musical talent, it's really something that fascinates me, how I can dislike them so much, but admit that they are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
I know that's not mutually exclusive, but that's interesting to me. And, sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I try to examine my feelings and figure out why I feel this way about the Eagles. And I think, like you just mentioned, their self-serious alpha dogness mixed with their seemingly unholy passion for lawsuits makes their whole peaceful, easy feeling, take it easy, 8-track classics ring a little hollow.
Yeah, it's so disingenuous. Like, you're the least easy taking it people of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hard-pressed to name a group who better exemplifies the curdling of the 60s hippie dream, which, ironically, Joe Walsh was a student at Ohio's Kent State University in 1970 when the National Guard opened fire on a peaceful anti-war protest, killing 4 students, which is an incident that historically has been viewed alongside the murder at the Rolling Stones concert at Altamont as the death knell of the 60s. So there's that. But there's also something just so much more, something unexplainable that inspires such strong negative feelings against the group who makes music that is really, by any metric, pretty inoffensive. So to me, like I keep saying, that is just what makes the Eagles so interesting. And I know I'm not alone in feeling that way. Following the death of Eagles co-benevolent dictator Glenn Frey in 2016, Billboard published a piece written by Chris Willman called "Why Are the Eagles So Hated?" An explainer on the immensely popular yet divisive rock band. That headline is questionable timing, considering it was written while Glenn Frey's body was probably still warm, but the New York Daily News did one better, publishing a piece with the headline, "Glenn Frey's death is sad, but the Eagles were a horrific band." But Chris Willman is a little more even-handed in his Billboard piece as he tries to break down the hatred for the Eagles in less emotional and more intellectual terms. And he cites several reasons why everyone seemingly hates the Eagles. One reason is that the band evokes the schism between East Coast and West Coast music rivalries, less with the bands themselves, but mostly with the critics. The New York-based critics historically hated the Eagles for the same reason that New Yorkers generally hate LA. They think they're soft. The rest of Robert Christgau's quote, and Robert Christgau's The New Yorker reads, "The Eagles are the ultimate in California dreaming, a fantasy of fulfillment that has been made real only in the hip, upper-middle-class suburbs of Marin County and the Los Angeles canyons." What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that tracks. I mean, despite all of their highfalutenness about this song being like the death of the California dream, I mean, at their heart, every other one of their songs is about how great the California lifestyle, taking it easy, and Tequila Sunrise this, and how great taking it to the limit is. Is it?
No. Well, let me ask you. You are a longtime New Yorker who recently moved out.
Oh, people out here are soft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah, for sure.
But New Yorkers are needlessly hard. True or false?
You know what? You know what's actually really interesting? Reading about this band and knowing how none of them were actually from California. But it's funny to me because they epitomize, they're not the Midwest mentality of being like genuinely nice. They're the they're the Los Angeles mentality of being outwardly nice and secretly huge dicks.
And secretly suing you.
Whereas New Yorkers, I've found, are gruff or whatever, like, hey, I'm
Outwardly
walking
dicks.
here. But we'll go out of their way to help you. I never felt like a New Yorker rudeness. I mean, surface rudeness, but like I've always held that about New York. So,
well, I'm from Boston, who are even meaner. So,
we're not talking about Boston. What does Boston even have? Dropkick Murphys, a couple of colleges.
Well, according to this Billboard piece, another reason for scorn against the Eagles is their supposed inoffensiveness. The previously mentioned Daily News hatchet job, the Eagles were a horrific band, described them as, quote, easy listening, even too soft for an elevator, the music your mom and dad would play in the living room hi-fi while you went upstairs and listened to The Clash after dinner.
Yeah, there's,
an easy shot, but
as much as like when I think about like the harmony, the kind of polished Laurel Canyon stuff, like they really were polished within an inch of their life. If you think about like the other 3 and 5 part harmony guys of the era, they are tremendous harmony singers. I mean, it's really amazing. But it's just so polished. I mean, they talk about when Joe Walsh joined the band, they were like, Don Henley was like, you can't move on stage. Like, none of that rock star shit. It's supposed to be about the music, man. I'm like, let Joe Walsh move on stage, dude.
Don Henley said that? Because I thought when they hired Joe Walsh, they were interested in getting more rocky. And it was like...
sonically, but yeah, the quote that I read was he was like, they were like, I think it might have been in the Mark Elliott book. They were basically said, we don't do the like, hold your hand up to your ear while you're playing the guitar solo, or like play between your knees, or like all that stuff. Like, we're about the music, man. I'm like, well, that's why you have back problems, Don Henley, is because you got to stick up your ass. Oh, boy. And commercial.
And perhaps the most compelling reason for all the Eagles' hatred is that we've simply been taught to do it after years of social and cultural conditioning. In his book, I Wear the Black Hat, Grappling with Villains, Real and Imagined, critic Chuck Klosterman wrote about the Eagles, nodding to Robert Christgau's famous line by calling his chapter, "Another thing that interests me about the Eagles is that I am contractually obligated to hate them." And in this section, Chuck Klosterman writes, after spending the first 25 years of my life believing that they were merely boring, I suddenly decided that the Eagles were the worst band that had ever existed or could ever exist. I saw The Big Lebowski and decided the main character should become the role model for all human thought. Electronica was on MTV. Even grandmas were temporary postmodernists. Aspirant Urban Outfitter employees were excited about technology and really into Neutral Milk Hotel. It was the logical time to believe Glenn Frey was Pol Pot. And elsewhere in the piece, Chuck Klosterman describes the Eagles as, quote, the most unpopular, super popular entity ever created by California, not counting Ronald Reagan. They effortlessly represented what people do not like about Malibu, which is true.
I mean, he had that famous thing about Coldplay, too, right? Coldplay is like British Eagles, really good harmonies, really hard on your sleeve, jibber jabber, really inoffensive and boring. That's, again, I don't like hate it. I'm like, this is all really well executed. These guys are pros. Like,
well, you do hate it. You just admit that it's well done.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
Yeah. But at the end of the piece, Chuck Klosterman reevaluates his feelings for the Eagles, and he comes to see them as, quote, just an old rock band who made music that was significant and relaxing and inevitable. And he also admitted that only an idiot would argue that Take It Easy is poorly written or badly executed, which, like we just said, that's the correct take, I feel like.
Inevitable is really interesting because it's really funny to think about where they were situated in terms of the country rock stuff. Like, you know, when they had what's his name?
Bernie Leadon?
Yeah, he was in the Flying Burrito Brothers, right?
Yeah.
So you have like a direct lineage to like country,
the original
country rock, right? And then they progressively winnowed all of those elements out and created like, you know, easy listening arena rock, and which is essentially the template for like the commercial music of the 80s, you know, like inevitable is a tremendous word to apply to this band's arc, you know?
Yeah. You know, each of these scholars have neglected to mention one of the biggest reasons why I find the Eagles detestable is the inconsistent use of an article in the band's name. Is it the Eagles or is it Eagles? I've heard both.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways, yeah.
If it's Eagles, that's inexcusable. I'm sorry. It's the same with Talking Heads. I'm sorry. It's the Talking Heads. I can't leave out the article.
It's Eagles, no article on Spotify. It's
I hate that. I hate that so much.
And yet their header says the Eagles are one of the most iconic bands in the history of music. Like, yeah, it's not great. It's not great. What do you think about Pixies?
I can live with that. I can even live with Talking Heads if I had to.
They're weird enough, but
yeah, yes, that you know what? That's exactly what it is. You are weird enough to be precious about how I refer to your band, but no, the Eagles. No, you were the Eagles. I'm sorry.
Well, from the song's cringeworthy original title to the Steely Dan song that inspired a key lyric, to the theories about whether or not it was a real place, here's everything you didn't know about Hotel California. In the mid-'70s, the Eagles were on top of the damn world, where Don Henley had believed he would rightfully end up since he was born, perming iron in hand, in Gilmer, Texas, the birthplace of Johnny Mathis.
Is he permed or is that his natural hair?
He said it was natural, but I mean, yeah, what a clown. You don't get an afro. That doesn't happen.
The dad from the Brady Bunch did.
I guess that's true. Lindsey Buckingham.
No, yeah.
Famous white guy afros of the 70s. Who else?
.tumblr.com.
Yeah. The band's previous album, 1975's One of These Nights, spawned 3 top 10 singles, and the greatest hits album that we talked about wound up forcing the RIAA to invent the designation of platinum. Did you know that?
I didn't. I thought platinum was earlier in the 70s. I thought the Beach Boys compilation Endless Summer went like quadruple platinum or double platinum or something in 73. I didn't realize it was that late.
You'd love it to be the Beach Boys, wouldn't you?
I would, yeah. No,
You
I know. It bothers me this the Eagles.
You ice cream shirt wearing son of a bitch. We were under the microscope, Glenn Frey said at the time. Everybody was going to look at the next record we made and pass judgment. Don Henley and I were going, man, this better be good. This was not long after Don Fingers Felder had joined the band in 1974, just one day after being called in to add slide guitar on the tracks Good Day in Hell and Already Gone. Assuming he was being brought on board as a full member, he was wrong, realizing that the unholy alliance between Don Henley and Glenn Frey ran the band as a, quote, benevolent dictatorship. Per Felder's scathingly petty tell-all book, Heaven and Hell, Frey could be a bully, and Henley a controlling perfectionist, about whom Glenn Frey himself once said, no one can suck the fun out of a room like Don Henley.
That's great. I like that.
This is your best friend and creative partner saying that about you. Frey and Henley's stance was that no band could function as a democracy. They compared the dynamic to a sports team, saying, if people play their positions and play their strengths, everything turns out well. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We always understood that. Some of the other people didn't understand that. They disliked Felder asserting himself and asking for things like songwriting credits, with Henley saying at one point, think of how much could be accomplished if no one cared about credit. Oof. Ooh. And in the History of the Eagles documentary, Don Felder was never ever satisfied, never ever happy.
I really see both sides of this. This is tricky because on one hand, if you're as talented as Don Felder is, you might expect to be treated with, I don't know, a certain amount of respect. Get a little thing like songwriting credit, maybe. Hey, maybe Glenn Frey was jealous of his musical abilities to a certain extent. Fingers Felder is a way better guitarist than Glenn Frey. But on the other hand, in bands, seniority obviously matters, and no one wants the new guy coming in and throwing their weight around. But as Don Felder tells it, he was being disrespected on a daily basis. That sows the seeds for the end of this episode, shall I say.
In addition to Fingers Felder's unhappiness, bassist and sweet cinnamon bun too pure for this world, Randy Meisner, was also feeling on the outs. He told the band's biographer Mark Elliott, we were all real close, more or less, up until the year of Hotel California. I just didn't feel like I was part of the group at that point. Success changed everything. When we first started, we were really close, like brothers. We'd sit around, smoke a doob together, drink beer, and have a good time. By 1976, it just wasn't the same. We couldn't sit down like the guys anymore. It was all business. The friendships were all gone by that point.
Oh, Randy Meisner, he's got the beautiful falsetto voice that you can hear on Take It to the Limit. Great bass player. Sweet, the goodest boy, Randy Meisner. The most likable member of the Eagles. Well, no, sorry. Second to Joe Walsh. Speaking of which, another key lineup change was the swapping in of Joe, the Midwest Madman Walsh, a nickname I just made up, for Bernie Lead Lips Ledin. Same. Founding member Ledin had formerly been a member of the Flying Burrito Brothers and was way more into the country side of the country rock sound the Beatles are credited with popularizing. The breaking point in his relationship with the band supposedly came when, one night, as Frey was intensely talking about the direction the band should head in next, Ledin interrupted him by pouring a beer over his head and saying, you need to chill out, man. Who among us? Apparently, he later regretted this, saying that it wasn't his proudest moment and it was really disrespectful, etc., etc., etc. But it sounds pretty funny.
It sounds hilarious. Oh, can you imagine how mad he got?
I mean, he kind of came out on top. He left the Eagles, presumably got a ton of money from his time in the Eagles, and he got one over on Glenn Frey. And then he rejoined. I think things are relatively good between them. I think relatively recently, in the 2000s at least, he rejoined the Eagles for, I think it was called just the History of the Eagles tour. I think around the same time that documentary, History of the Eagles, the two-parter came out in, I think, 2013. And for anyone who hasn't seen that documentary, it's like, for me, it's up there with the Beatles anthology in terms of just a truly great rock doc epic. It's so funny. It's so petty. It's so nasty. It's filled with so many great rock cliches, usually involving mountains and being on top of them.
What is the one? I'm trying to think of the Joe Walsh quote on the process of getting famous. The first thing that happens is you give a label and you got to live up in it. And then you just get caught up in that. And I forget what the second thing is.
You gotta live up in it.
Apparently, this is the I haven't seen this, but this is from a Grantland feature on when that came out, and his quote on their breakup is, "So much stuff just happened."
Oh my God.
You know, there's a philosopher who says, as you live your life, it appears to be anarchy and chaos and random events, non-related events, smashing into each other and causing this situation or that situation. And then this happens and it's overwhelming. And it just looks like, what in the world is going on? And later, when you look back at it, it looks like a finely crafted novel. But at the time, it don't. I have to give Bill Simmons credit. This is an incredible line in this piece. First, Joe Walsh never names the philosopher, and as far as we know, that philosopher was some dude named Clyde who gave Walsh incredible coke on a Thursday night in like 1978. Second, there's a 20% he stole that entire thing from Charles Dickens and just doesn't remember. Third, that's an amazing quote.
I mean, Joe Walsh is like the Yogi Berra of rock and roll.
Joe Walsh was born in Kansas, raised in Ohio, New York, and New Jersey, but then moved back to Ohio to get his, went to Kent State, as you mentioned, to get his music career on the road. His first two bands were basically like Ohio bar groups, but Joe was the star. And in between doing Forrest Gump type like selling Jimmy Page his iconic Gibson Les Paul and learning slide guitar from Dwayne Allman, he made...
That I didn't know.
Yeah, he made a name for himself. James Gang Whips.
Yeah, Funk 49's incredible.
They were never commercially famous. They were really kind of only a hit in and around Ohio and the Midwest, but they're such a great power trio. I actually found this really great quote from Joe Walsh talking about it.
Oh, boom, a lily, wah, wah, beep, beep, pop, a loo, la, whoa, yeah. Ah! 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 Ah!
That's the intro to the song Meadows. This is what I'm saying. Like Don Henley would never start a song like that. For Joe Walsh, it was Tuesday. Jordan, tee us up some of the best Joe Walsh stories.
Yes, I have so many great Joe Walsh stories. He's amazing. I think I talked about this on a Revolver episode, but Joe Walsh worshipped the Beatles and he wanted to be one so bad. And in the mid-'60s, he was in an early group called the Measles, and he set about trying to obsessively learn the guitar part to the Beatles track And Your Bird Can Sing from their 1966 album Revolver. And he spent weeks and weeks, maybe even months, trying to work the guitar part out by ear, not realizing that it was actually two guitars playing the part. And then he became famous around town for being able to play the whole part on one guitar. And he would proudly say, not even George can do that. And then now, of course, he is Ringo Starr's brother-in-law. He's married to Ringo's wife's sister,
Lily Tomlin.
Yeah. And he's also the owner of Klaus Voormann's original cover artwork for Revolver. So Joe Walsh came out on top there. I love a fellow Beatle obsessive getting what he wants.
After leaving James Gang and recording some records under the name Barnstorm, Walsh was invited to join the Eagles by their manager, notorious music industry heavy Irving Azoff. And he did join the band in 1975, largely against Don Henley's wishes. As we mentioned earlier, Don Henley thought Joe was too wild for the band.
He was not wrong. There's the famous quote about Joe Walsh from Glenn Frey. Joe was an interesting bunch of guys. The guys in the Eagles gave Joe Walsh a chainsaw for his birthday once as a joke. Probably got a lot of use. Joe was the American champion of hotel room trashing after being trained by his British counterpart, Keith Moon. Joe Walsh said in the History of the Eagles documentary, one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to me was that Keith Moon decided he liked me.
That's, again, a great line.
Incredible quote. This guy's a quote machine. So as a result of Joe's penchant for destroying hotel rooms, there is a long list of hotels in which the Eagles were not welcome. My favorite story from this era, if you'll indulge me once more in my Joe Walsh stories, is when Joe Walsh was at the Astor Towers in Chicago with John Belushi.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. They were not allowed into the fancy dining room because they were both wearing jeans. And, they had a dress code at places like this. Instead of just, going back to their room and putting on slacks, John Belushi and Joe Walsh went into an alleyway and spray painted their jeans black. Unfortunately, they were hungry and didn't wait for the paint to dry. So when they sat down on these antique Queen Anne chairs, the paint came off. This caused a problem when they stood up and the whole backside of their pants were blue again. And I guess they were so pissed off by this whole frustrating experience that they went back to Joe's room and caused $28,000 worth of damage in a single night. And amazingly, Joe was still up to these tricks years later when he was in Ringo Starr's all-star band in the late 80s and early 90s. I interviewed Ringo's drum tech a few years back, and he told me one night when the band were at the Ritz-Carlton, Joe glued the furniture in his suite to the ceiling. The drum tech told me, Joe carried a hot glue gun and glued the table to the ceiling, and the lamp plugged in, turned on, and the ashtray with a lit cigarette in it. And then he took a bunch of Polaroids. And this stunt came with a $4,000 price tag. And when Joe came in the next day for a sound check, the drum tech asked him, "Hey, Joe, have a fun time last night?" And Joe said it was worth every penny.
Good for him.
I know. Stuff like that would normally offend me, but for some reason with Joe Walsh, it doesn't.
He was in the band's orbit as a solo artist. He was managed by the Eagles manager Azoff, and he used Eagles pal Bill Simsick as his record producer. But we mentioned earlier how his entry in the band kind of sheared away the last remaining vestiges of any country influences in the band, except for maybe the harmonies and the occasional pedal steel. You can just put pedal steel in anything. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Little music industry secret for you. Walsh's big contribution to the Hotel California record, other than the dueling lead part in the title song, was the guitar line to Life in the Fast Lane.
Yeah, it was like a coordination exercise. He described it as like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. It was like a string skipping exercise, kind of like
I was
Sweet
just about
Child
to say,
of Mine.
yeah, there's a listicle there, like top 10 riffs that came out of exercises. There's probably a lot of them. Frey told Cameron Crowe, "I was riding in a car with a drug dealer, a guy we used to call the Count, because his count was never very good. We were driving out to an Eagles poker game. I was in the passenger seat. He moved over to the left lane and started driving 75 to 80 miles per hour. I said, 'Hey man, slow down.' He goes, 'Hey man, it's life in the fast lane.'" Frey hung on to the title, and Walsh just threw down the riff one day as the band was warming up, caught both Henley and Frey's ears. Frey said, "It made a statement. Joe Walsh was officially in the band."
I think it says a lot about Glenn Frey. He's the kind of guy that thinks that the phrase "life in the fast lane" is cool, is badass.
Also, 75 miles an hour on the interstate, like not that fast, dude.
I know. I was trying. I mean, unless they're like going through like Sunset Boulevard or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that thought too. Is it worth doing a brief rundown of 70s rock stars who were a little too open about crediting their dealers for their big blockbuster hits? Fleetwood Mac were going to credit their coke dealer on Rumors until he, according to Mick Fleetwood, got snuffed, as he so charmingly described it. And then wasn't there a Black Sabbath one too?
Yeah, and when they made Volume 4, during which they had cocaine smuggled in speaker cabinets, the liner notes thank the great Coca-Cola. It was so open in the 70s, dude. I mean, like, I've read about, like, the history of drugs in this country, and, doctors used to just do cocaine. Like, oh, yeah, it's good for you. Insane.
I love how Glenn Frey was scandalized not only by the speed that this guy was driving, but also just the nature of the song itself. He later said, "I could hardly listen to Life in the Fast Lane when we were recording it because I was getting high a lot at the time, and the song made me ill." This was him talking to Rolling Stone in 1979. "We were trying to paint a picture that cocaine wasn't great. It turns on you. It messed up my back muscles, messed up my nerves, it messed up my stomach, and made me paranoid."
The title track was the first one tracked for the record, but it had dated back to long before that. Don Franzia Felder.
He's going to give nicknames to everybody?
Everybody gets a nickname.
Yeah. You get a nickname, and you get a nickname.
He'd rented a beach house in Malibu before the band started on the follow-up to one of these nights. And he told Guitar World in 2013, "I remember sitting in the living room on a spectacular July day with the doors wide open. I had a bathing suit on and was sitting on this couch, soaking wet, thinking the world is a wonderful place to be. This is why people hate Californians. I had this acoustic 12-string and started tinkling around with it, and those Hotel California chords just kind of oozed out. He committed a demo of the tune to his TIAC 4-track tape recorder, playing bass himself and using a drum machine. And he told Gibson.com in 2010, I knew it was unique, but I didn't know if it was appropriate for the Eagles. It was a kind of reggae, almost an abstract guitar part for what was on the radio back then. Did you add? You added these?
No. You did.
I must have done it in a fugue state. Don Head Honcho Henley and Glenn Super Freak Frey took something of a dim view of Felder's demos that he contributed to the session. Aside from what would become Hotel California, he brought them over a dozen other songs, all of which they rejected. Frey would later say, 95% of them were cluttered with guitar licks, and we'd listen to one and go, well, where do you sing?
These guys are such dicks. I love it.
But Henley did hear something he liked in that beach demo. He told Rolling Stone, Felder had submitted a cassette tape containing about a half dozen different pieces of music. None of them moved me until I got to that one. It was a simple demo, a progression of arpeggiated guitar chords, along with some horn-like sustained note lines, all over a simple 4/4 drum machine pattern. There may have been some Latin-style percussion in there, too. I think I was driving down Benedict Canyon Drive at night, or maybe even North Crescent Drive. What a name dropper. The first time I heard the piece, and I remember thinking, this has potential. I think we can make something interesting out of this.
I love how both Don Henley and Glenn Frey make it seem like they plucked this raw diamond out of a messy pile of crap.
Frey, in a 1992 episode of In the Studio with Redbeard, recalled, we said this is electric Mexican reggae. Wow, what a nice synthesis of styles. That is a horrifying sentence. And so, Mexican reggae became the song's working title during their early sessions before the lyrics were finalized. Jesus Christ. I can't... Another big point of contention between Felder and the Hare Twins was the partially complete album cut Victim of Love, which Felder had thought he was going to sing himself. Takes were done with Felder singing lead, but Messrs. Frey and Henley weren't having it. There was no space for filler, and Don Felder, for all of his talents as a guitar player, was not a singer, Frey said in the History of the Eagles, with Henley adding the incredible, he says, we let Mr. Felder sing it dozens of times over the space of a week, over and over. It simply did not come up to band standards. So they arrived at an incredible solution. They had Irving Azoff, their manager, take Felder out to dinner and tell him, hey, you're not going to be singing that song, while Henley was back in the studio recording over his vocal takes. Chef's kiss of dickishness.
That's up there with Fleetwood Mac axing Stevie Nicks' Silver Springs from Rumors, and then making Mick Fleetwood take her out to the parking lot to basically shoot her in the head and tell her that her most cherished song was getting cut from the album.
Written as a gift for her mother.
Yes. And then Stevie ended up dating Don Henley for a while in the 70s, too. So everybody's terrible. Everybody's terrible.
It was a truly awful scene. I have to think, like, Tom Petty was the only guy who was cool out of that Laurel Canyon thing because he came from Florida. He came from Gainesville, you know? But yeah, everyone else in that is such a ponderous... Who's cool in that scene?
Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, like, so just all the all-time assholes of rock and roll came out of Laurel Canyon. You had Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Eagles, Warren Zevon. Like, good Lord.
Zappa? Difficult, not dickish, maybe.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I wouldn't put him in a Henley category.
But getting back to Victim of Love, Don and Glenn predictably got pretty nasty about it. Don Felder later said, it was a bit of a bitter pill to swallow not to sing on it. I felt Don Henley was taking that song from me because I'd been promised a song on this album. And Don Henley disagreed. He said in the History of the Eagles documentary, I have no recollection of anybody being promised anything. And he claims that when Felder brought him the song, it wasn't even a song. It was a chord progression, no title, no lyrics, and no melody. Henley added, Felder demanding to sing that song is the equivalent of me demanding to play lead guitar on Hotel California. It just didn't make sense. And, I mean, Glenn Frey sort of defending this power dynamic they'd set up, he admitted that, he and Don kind of carved up the vocal duties between them in the early part of the band's career. But as the 70s wore on and the band became bigger and bigger, he let Don sing more songs because that's kind of what the people wanted. And it was kind of obvious that Don Henley was the better singer of the two. This was Glenn's own way of saying that the band's interests outweighed individual interests. As Joe Walsh put it, this is the best thing for the Eagles. And Don Felder never forgot that. We were all alphas and all very assertive and powerful in our own way. In his own defense, Don Felder would admit, there's no comparing my vocal to Don Henley's vocal. There's no comparing anybody's vocal to Don Henley. But he never forgot or forgave the slight. And it must have been particularly galling for him that every other member of the Eagles had a solo vocal spot on Hotel California, the album named for his own musical baby, except himself. But on a nicer note, owners of the old vinyl edition of Hotel California will notice the phrase VOL is a 5-piece live inscribed on the album's run-out groove. That's the little smooth part of the record, right outside of the label in the center. This was a little inside joke. It signaled that Victim of Love was recorded live by the 5 Eagles with no overdubs. This was etched in there by the band's producer Bill Simsick, which basically was meant as a big middle finger to critics who accused the Eagles of being too clinical and soulless in the studio and just overdubbing things within an inch of their life and not having that authentic in-the-room band sound.
That said, I think he also said there were like 33 edits on Hotel California.
That sounds right, yep.
So, Bill Sims.
Not a single vowel in that guy's name.
Trying to think of a nickname for him. Bill Stuttering Simsick.
Vowel movement.
He came into their band's orbit via Joe Walsh. He'd produced not just the James Gang, but Walsh's solo records. And the Eagles ditched Glyn Johns in favor of Simsick after hearing his work on those records and wanting to move in a more rockin' direction. Simsick has a great sound-on-sound feature where he talks about recording the song. And he said in his initial meeting with Henley, he said, how many mics I'd use on a set of drums? And I told him 8 or 9. Glyn Johns was known for using 3. Then, when Glenn Frey wanted to know how long he could work on his guitar solos, I told him, as long as it takes. They wanted to rock, and that's what I did. So it was a good marriage. You don't need 9 mics on a drum set. You really don't need that many mics on a drum set.
Control. It's all about control. These guys are all about control.
Yeah. Both One of Those Nights and Hotel California were recorded half at the record plant in L.A. as a concession to the band, and half at Criteria in Miami, where Simsick lived after being scared out of California by an earthquake. Really.
Have you had any earthquakes?
Oh, yeah, a bunch. But he was like shaken out of bed in the middle of the night, right? Yeah. If I recall correctly. And then he was like, this, which is, understandable. He told Sound on Sound, every time we were at Criteria, the guys were actually quite happy to be out of LA and away from all of the partying and the hangers-on. Hotel California took 9 months to make, and throughout that time, we'd go back and forth between LA and Miami. We'd do a month in LA and take 3 or 4 weeks off, and then a month in Miami. We'd do a month in LA and take 3 or 4 weeks off, and then a month in Miami and take 3 or 4 weeks off, because we'd record tracks, and then they'd have to go away and write the words. What an incredibly relaxed schedule. How lovely for them. Very seldom they would write a full song all in one go. Somebody would have a lick, somebody would have a riff, and then we'd develop that in the studio more than anything else. All that said, Criteria was not exactly a sober living facility. Next door were Black Sabbath working on their Technical Ecstasy album, and simultaneously undercutting the Eagles by playing too loud, which is just another reason to love Black Sabbath. Tony Iommi, Sabbath guitarist, told Uncut in 2014, the Eagles were recording next door, but we were too loud for them. It kept coming through the wall into their sessions. Hotel California's delicate closing ballad, The Last Resort, had to be re-recorded multiple times due to noise leakage. But the Eagles held their own in volume of cocaine consumed. Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler recalled venturing into a studio recently vacated by the band. Before we could start recording, we had to scrape all the cocaine out of the mixing board. I think they'd left about a pound of cocaine in the board. Given the length of the recording process, one of the stumbling blocks to getting Hotel California on tape was Felder remembering what he'd played on the demo. He told Music Radar in 2012, Joe and I started jamming and Don said, no, stop, it's not right. I said, what do you mean it's not right? And he said, no, you've got to play it just like the demo. Only problem was, I did that demo a year earlier. I couldn't even remember what was on it. They settled this with a cross-country call. I had to call my housekeeper in Malibu, who took the cassette, put it in a blaster, a boombox, and played it with the phone held up to the blaster. It was close enough to the demo to make Don happy.
Inconveniencing a housekeeper to please Don Henley just seems about right.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
The first two versions of Hotel California were recorded in L.A. The third and final one was cut in Miami, which is perfect for a song about a bunch of not Californians writing about the California mythos. Simzik told Sound on Sound, the first version we recorded was just a riff. However, once Don Henley began to write the lyrics, it turned out to be in the wrong key. Felder elaborated to Music Radar, Don went out to start singing on it, and it sounded like Barry Gibb in this high voice. I went, wait, that just doesn't work. So I went out in the studio with a guitar, sat down with him and said, okay, let's drop it down to D minor. But that was still too high. C minor, still too high. How about A minor? That was too low. So we wound up having to play it in the key of B minor, which is not a particularly guitar-friendly key, but it was perfect for his voice. B minor is a very guitar-friendly key. What the hell are you talking about? Got all the open strings in there. It's the relative minor of D major. Like, have your open chords in that. What are you talking about? Franzia Felder. There's got to be a better F word I can slide in there.
Was that Francie or was that Simzik?
That's Felder.
Oh, it's Felder. Oh.
Half of Hotel California's legacy is its cryptic, ominous lyrics, which I love. I actually do love the lyrics to this song. It walks such a great line between like very specific imagery and vague turns of phrase that have gone on to just enter the lexicon. Great writing. And Frogman Felder, Frogmouth, for frog, friggity frack, frickin' frack Felder. What do I just keep riffing? Felder described the writing of the words to Howard Stern in 2008. Don Henley and Glenn wrote most of the words. All of us kind of drove into LA at night. Nobody was from California, and if you drive into LA at night, you can just see this glow on the horizon of lights, and the images that start running through your head of Hollywood, and all the dreams that you have. And so it was kind of about that.
They also said that it was about the myth-making of Southern California and also the myth-making of the American dream in general, because, as Don Henley sagely observes, it's a fine line between the American dream and the American nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, he was an English major, right?
Is he? I didn't know that.
That's what that Bill Simmons piece said. Henley told author Mark Elliott in To the Limit, The Untold Story of the Eagles, the concept had to do with taking a look at all the band had gone through, personally and professionally, while it was still happening to them. We were getting an extensive education in life, in love, in business. Beverly Hills was still a mythical place to us. In that sense, it became something of a symbol, and the hotel the locus of all that LA had come to mean for us. In a sentence, I'd sum it up as the end of innocence, round one.
Even worse, they took a page from the Bono playbook, calling the song, quote, a journey from innocence to experience.
Henley and I were listening to the Hotel California demo tape together on an airplane, and we were talking about what we would write and how we wanted to be more cinematic, I told Cameron Crowe. We wanted this song to open like an episode of The Twilight Zone, just one shot after another.
That's kind of cool.
I actually like what he says here. And he added that they wanted the song's narrator to be like a character in John Fowles' novel The Magus, where every time he walks through a door, there's a new version of reality. We wanted to write a song just like it was a movie. The guy's driving across the desert. He's tired. He's smoking. Comes up over a hill, sees some lights, pulls in. First thing he sees is a really strange guy at the front door welcoming him. Come on in. Walks in. Then it becomes Fellini-esque. Strange women, effeminate men, shadowy corridors, disembodied voices, debauchery, illusion, weirdness. So we thought, let's really take some chances. Let's try to write in a way that we've never written before. And then Don Henley comes in with just a home run of pretension to Cameron Crowe. I've always been interested in architecture and the language of architecture, and at that time I was particularly keen on the mission style of early California. I thought there was a certain mystery and romance about it. I don't know why I'm doing my Tom. Is that Tom Ford? That's the voice?
Oh, I thought it was Mr. Hand.
Could be. Yeah. He continued, huffing his own farts. Then, there are all the great movies and plays in which hotels figure prominently, not only as a structure, but as a dramatic device. Films such as Grand Hotel, The Night Porter, and even Psycho. Motels count too. There are plays like Neil Simon's Plaza Suite and California Suite, which Glenn and I went to see while writing the song. But there are also less lofty concerns at play in the song's lyrics. The line, they stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast, was, in Fry's words to Crow, a little post-it back to Steely Dan. Apparently, Walter Becker's girlfriend loved the Eagles, and she played them all the time. I think it drove him nuts. Yeah, no shit. So the story goes that they were having a fight one day, and that was the genesis of the line, "Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening," in Everything You Did from Steely Dan's The Royal Scam album. During the writing of Hotel California, we decided to volley. We just wanted to allude to Steely Dan rather than mentioning them outright, so Dan got changed to knives, which is still, a penile metaphor. Stabbing, thrusting, etc.
Well, Steely Dan, the band name, is famously named after the dildo from William Burroughs' Naked Lunch. So, yeah, he's right. I got to give it to him.
A penile metaphor.
The man knows a penile metaphor. You got to hand it to him.
As for colitas, the word is the diminutive feminine plural of the Spanish word cola, or tail. Fry has said that it's slang for the very tip-top of a marijuana bud, where all the sap, congeals, making it the most potent part to smoke. According to the site The Straight Dope, which is a famous weekly column in the pages of the alt-weekly The Chicago Reader, written by a journalist named Cecil Adams, I guess he wrote an email to Irving Azoff in 1997 asking about that word. And Irving Azoff, to his credit, wrote him back, said, "In response to your recent memo, in 1976, during the writing of the song Hotel California by Messrs. Henley and Fry, the word colitas was translated for them by their Mexican-American road manager as Little Buds. You have obviously already done the necessary extrapolation. Thank you for your inquiry." Incredible. The line, "Her mind is Tiffany twisted, she got the Mercedes Benz, she got a lot of pretty boys that she call friends," is about Henley's relationship with actress Lori Rodkin. Tiffany Twisted, I have to assume, is a reference to Tiffany the brand. And Mercedes-Benz is actually quite clever because it's wordplay, alluding to, the car, but it's also referring to the, derangement that you get if you surface too fast from being underwater. They call that the Benz, which is the Radiohead album is famously named after that. So that's a clever line. I got to give him that.
It's no penile metaphor, but okay.
Well, begrudgingly, I have to give it to them. But Henley told Mark Elliott, "I wouldn't be crowing if I were Ms. Rodkin. As far as I'm concerned, she's the Norma Desmond of her generation."
Oh.
He's a mean man. Henley was famously one of the great swinging dick bachelors of the 70s in LA, leaving behind a trail of exes that included Rodkin, who he would call to get back together with, only to find out that she'd reconciled with her ex before him, Elton John's lyricist Bernie Taupin. And also, as you mentioned before, Stevie Nicks. A lot of the best lines in Hotel California are quite specifically about Don's relationship with Lori. Someone close to both of them told Elliot for the book. In an interview with the Dutch magazine Zigzag shortly before Hotel California's release, Don Henley said, This is a concept album. There's no way to hide it. But it's not set in the Old West, the cowboy thing, It's more urban this time. It's our bicentennial year. The country is 200 years old, so we figured since we are the Eagles, and the eagle is our national symbol, that we were obliged to make some kind of a little bicentennial statement using California as the microcosm of the whole United States, or the whole world, if you will, and try to wake people up and say, we've been okay so far for 200 years, but we're going to have to change if we're going to continue to be around. We were obliged to make some kind of statement. Ooh, Henley. We've finally reached the nadir of Henley quotes that I dug up for this episode.
I love this. I'm so glad you found this.
He was asked in 2009 by the Plain Dealer music critic John Sater about the line, "So I called up the captain, please bring me my wine." He said, "We haven't had that spirit here since 1969. Sater pointed out to him that wines are fermented while spirits are distilled. Henley's response is breathtaking. Thanks for the tutorial, and no, you're not the first person to bring this to my attention, and you're not the first to completely misinterpret the lyric and miss the metaphor. Believe me, I've consumed enough alcoholic beverages in my time to know how they are made and what the proper nomenclature is. But that line in the song has little or nothing to do with alcoholic beverages. It's a socio-political statement. My only regret in writing it would be having to explain it in detail to you, which would defeat the purpose of using literary devices in songwriting and lower the discussion to some silly and irrelevant argument about chemical processes. In his defense, that line has always seemed very obvious to me as wordplay.
Yeah.
So that it was a boner question, but wow. Thanks for the tutorial.
Yeah, that's really...
But with lyrics these scrutinized, it's no wonder that 3 people were charged in July of 2022 after allegedly conspiring to steal Henley's handwritten lyrics to the song, as well as 2 others from this album.
One of them is a high-ranking curator from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who I actually met a few months before his arrest.
Did he look shifty?
A little bit, actually. Yeah. I don't think they were trying to steal it. I think they were trying to sell it. I think it was like part of the Rock Hall archives. I forget. I didn't follow the case that closely, but yeah, I think it was like something even weirder.
Prosecutors from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office claim that the lyrics were improperly obtained and could be worth over $1 million at auction. The 3 men pleaded not guilty and were released without bail pending trial. Eagles manager Irving Azoff said the case exposed the truth about music memorabilia sales of highly personal, stolen items hidden behind a facade of legitimacy. Okay, man. I will recite this header because I was proud of it. To the tune of Benny and the Jets. Fingers and the Walsh. Dun, 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 dun. Bum, bum, ba-da-da. Smiz. Bill Smith. Producer Bill Smith told Sound on Sound that the recording of the extended Felder-Walsh twin guitar coda that concludes Hotel California was, quote, one of the most amazing times I've had as a producer. Don and Joe were with me in the control room, and we ran their mic cords out to amps in the studio so they could hear exactly what was happening. Don Felder was on one side of me, Joe Walsh was on the other, and I'm stuck in the middle with you. No, he did that. We were punching in all of these incredible guitar parts, which had not been written before we started to do it. So we were doing a lot of what we called search and destroy. Well, let's try this and let's try that. If I did that, then the harmony would be this. Just overdubbing all these leads was a basic 2-day process. And man, what a ball that was. They're both great, great players, and the 2 of them were on fire.
I have a question to you as somebody who's recorded in professional recording studios. 2 days to nail a solo.
It's 70 for sure. But yeah, actually, you know what? I have the perfect analog for this. When, during the making of Weezer's Blue album, Rivers Cuomo fired the guy who was playing guitar, the other guitarist in the band, the guy who actually wrote that finger-picking intro to My Name is Jonas. He fired that guy and then re-recorded all of that guy's guitar parts himself in one day.
Yes, that's right.
So, the 70s versus the 90s versus now, when they would be like, you don't get to do that, sorry. Or actually, you'd probably do it by yourself in your bedroom, crying. Felder told Music Radar in 2012 of the parts, I had a 59 Les Paul Sunburst, and I plugged into a 50s Tweed Deluxe, a narrow-paneled model. It was probably 55 or 56. He's describing like $10,000 worth of gear in that sentence. Joe played a Telecaster, but I'm not sure what amp he was using. And I think I had an Echoplex, which is a delay unit, in the loop at the time, but that was about it. Ranked by Guitar World readers as the 5th greatest guitar solo of all time in 2021, those leads were not planned out, as Walsh echoed in an interview with the mag. He said, Don Felder and I sat down and we worked out all the descending lines. After the basic track was done and Don Henley had sung, it was our turn. We agreed on who was going to play when at the end at the big solo, and we tried to complement each other and build up to the very last part. So the solos were not planned. They were spontaneous playing off of each other. We were really good at that, and the rest of the song was kind of planned out. We put these descending lines on that because that was the first set of overdubs.
And one interesting thing about the song's composition is that the chord progression, which is a fairly common flamenco chord progression.
In the Phrygian mode?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, it's something that's not often heard in rock music. So when Jethro Tull multi-instrumentalist Ian Anderson heard it, his ears perked up because he thought it was weirdly similar to his own composition, a song called We Used to Know from Jethro Tull's 1969 sophomore album, Stand Up. So that's a little suspicious. We might have a little bit of a Led Zeppelin obscure band Spirit, thank you, that Led Zeppelin
bassist Randy
accused of ripping
California.
off.
How could you forget Randy
Yes.
California, dude?
Yes.
Another great bass player named Randy. It's maybe the most bass player name.
It is, yeah. The fact that the Eagles and Jethro Tull toured together in 1972 was certainly an argument in Jethro Tull's favor. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull said maybe it was just something they kind of picked up, but Ian Anderson took a very gracious view of all this. He's quoted as saying, maybe it was just something that the band just kind of picked up on subconsciously and introduced that chord sequence into their famous song Hotel California sometime later. This is Ian Anderson talking to songfacts.com. But in the Eagles' defense, this tour with Jethro Tull took place some 2 years before Don Felder, Hotel California's primary composer, officially joined the band in 1974. Though he was a friend of founding guitarist Bernie Leadon at the time, so maybe he went to one of the shows where the Eagles were opening for Jethro Tull and heard this song and just subconsciously filed it away. Who knows? Don Felder himself later denied having ever heard the song We Used to Know at the time he wrote Hotel California, and he said he knew next to nothing about Jethro Tull other than the fact that they used a flautist. Maybe I'll punch in that song now and you can listen for yourself.
Whenever I get to feel this way, hard to find new words to say. A thing about the bad old days we used to know.
Either way, Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull didn't take it further than just musing on it in the press. He said it's just the same chord sequence. It's in a different time signature, different key, different context, and it's a very, very, very fine song they wrote. So I can't feel anything other than a sense of happiness for their sake. There's certainly no bitterness or any sense of plagiarism attached to my view on it, although I do sometimes allude in a joking way to accepting it as a kind of tribute.
Yeah, I mean, you can't copyright chord progressions. That's like just basic, music facts.
Have you heard the song?
This Jethro Tull song?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
Have you?
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing how it would relate.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably not a more polar opposite of the Eagles than Jethro Tull. Like,
yeah,
dance around the maypole in a giant long flute solo versus immaculate 5-part harmonies and about California. Another fun fact, Hotel California also contains a bass line and a drum part. That's a little bit of a joke because I find those parts underwhelming.
All the bass, well, I mean, it's just bad white boy reggae, I guess.
Mexican reggae, please.
Electric
Mexican reggae, please. Once mixing was complete, Don Felder told Ultimate Classic Rock in 2017, we had a playback party for the record company. After Hotel California played, Henley turned around and said, that's going to be our single. In those days, AM radio would only play something that was under 3 minutes and 30 seconds long, and it had to be a rock track or a danceable track or ballad of some kind. Hotel California was none of those. It was the absolute wrong format for radio. So I said to Don, I think that's an FM cut. It's something that'll play on FM radio, not AM radio. Don said, nope, this is going to be our single. We all went with it, and I've never been so happy to have been so wrong.
For the single release of Hotel California, the band went with a version of the album's cover art for the sleeve. The Hotel California album art was the work of British art director Kosh, a.k.a. Josh Kosh, the man responsible for the Beatles' Abbey Road album cover, the Who's Next album cover, the Rolling Stones' Get Your Ya-Ya's Out album cover, and many others. The guy's a real legend. Kosh recalled in a 2007 interview with Rock and Roll Report, Don Henley wanted me to find and portray Hotel California and portray it with a slightly sinister edge. So Kosh scouted locations with photographer David Alexander, and they arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel on Sunset Boulevard. But even after finding this location, achieving the requisite air of menace was a little challenging. Kosh said, to get the perfect picture, David and I perched nervously atop a 60-foot cherry picker, dangling over Sunset Boulevard in rush hour, shooting blindly into the sun. Both of us bought our Nikon cameras up in the basket, and we took turns shooting, ducking, and reloading. We used high-speed Etchachrome film as the light began to fade, and this film gave us the remarkable graininess of the final shot. And the chosen shot, captured at golden hour just before sunset, became iconic, though its subject was initially displeased. Kosh is quoted as saying, as the sales of Hotel California went through the roof, lawyers for the Beverly Hills Hotel threatened me with a cease and desist action. And then it was gently pointed out by my attorney that the hotel's requests for bookings had tripled since the release of the Eagles album. So it was quietly dropped. Meanwhile, the rear of the album cover was shot in the lobby of the Lido Hotel in Hollywood, which I'm going to see if that's still around.
Lido. Is that Boss
now
Skaggs?
it's an apartment building.
Yeah, of course it is. The only thing more LA would be if it was like a Starbucks or some shit.
A coffee bean.
Yeah. It's a fine album cover.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Kosh also designed the Hotel California logo initially as a neon sign, but it proved difficult to bend real neon tubings into the desired shape of the script, so they ended up airbrushing it.
Rumors have persisted for ages about this sinister double meaning of the lyrics and, in turn, the title. There is actually a literal Hotel California in Todos Santos, a town on Mexican's Baja California peninsula, but none of the Eagles ever stayed there. The two most persistent theories about the song's title are that it's a reference to the nickname of the Camarillo State Hospital, a state-run psychiatric hospital near Los Angeles, which housed thousands of patients across its 60-year history before it closed in 1997, and that it's about Satan.
Satan?
Is that a Metalocalypse reference?
No, it's Church Lady.
Oh, Church Lady. There's a great Metalocalypse bit with the Church of Satan where the preacher just keeps saying it in this. He's just like, "How Lord Satan." It's so funny. The Satanic Panic. I think this dated back to it started like right away, right? Because people had the lyrics and were immediately scrutinizing it because it's a long song and it's a lot of shit going on in it. But I think they were caught up in the Satanic Panic of the 80s and the whole backmasking thing that ensnared like Judas Priest and Led Zeppelin, everybody. But, there was some stuff there was ample fodder for this theory. There's the line trying to kill the beast, which is popularly, the name of Satan. And not having that spirit here since 1969, like it's a whole possession witchcraft thing. Yeah, nice. But also, is that the year the Church of Satan was founded?
I thought it was older than that. Anton LaVey was, I know he was in a 1967 documentary, like Mondo movie called Mondo Hollywood.
Founded in 66. Okay, so that doesn't hold up. The inner gatefold of the record has like a shadowy figure on the balcony, and people were like, "Oh, that's supposed to be Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan." The other various rumors that Snopes collected included that the song is a tribute to the place where the Satanic Bible was written, that devil worshippers bought an old church and rechristened it the Hotel California. Some or all of the Eagles were heavily involved with the occult or were disciples of LaVey. The album photographs were taken in and around a building that used to be LaVey's headquarters for the Church of Satan. And then the fun and false fact that in California, the Church of Satan is registered under the name Hotel California. So that's all fun. That's just harmless. Nobody's getting hurt there. I wish Don Henley had talked about that. He would probably quote f***ing Milton or Dante. The writing of Hotel California placed us in a lineage of those describing Satanism and hell. Like John Milton. I thought of myself as Dante, and Fingers Felder thought of himself as John Milton. Clearly, Joe Walsh was Thomas Aquinas. No, not a theology.
I'm just in awe of the fact that your voice in that voice sounds less congested and sick than your actual voice, which is part of me is like, don't just do that the rest of it.
Well, maybe. The song Hotel California entered the Billboard Hot 100 chart on February 26, 1977, topped the Hot 100 singles chart for 1 week, and by May, peaked at number 10 on the Easy Listening chart in April, and 3 months after it was first released, certified gold by the RIAA, representing 1 million copies shipped. The band won the Grammy for Record of the Year for Hotel California at the 20th Grammy Awards in 1978, a ceremony that manager Irving Azoff told the Recording Academy they wouldn't attend unless they were guaranteed to win. So they watched it live from their rehearsal room.
This is an amazing story.
Yeah.
The Recording Academy wanted the Eagles to perform, and that's, I guess, what set this whole thing off. And Irving Azoff said, not only will we not perform without some sort of guarantee that we're winners, but we won't even show up. And Azoff went so far as to suggest that the band hide in a secret dressing room at the auditorium where the Grammys were taking place, where they would emerge only if and when their name was called for Record of the Year winner.
They're hubris, man.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
This idea was rejected on the grounds that it was completely insane. They also toyed with the idea of having one of their artist friends accept the award for them, maybe Jackson Browne or Linda Ronstadt. This seemed like a better idea, but for whatever reason, they decided against it. So when the Eagles ultimately did win their Grammy, host Andy Williams just stood there expectantly waiting for someone to come forward. Not that the band cared much about their image, but manager Irving Azoff tried to do damage control the next day by putting out a press release saying that the band were in Miami working on their new album, and he ended the statement with a dismissive, "That's the future, this is the past. So piss on your Grammy." If they were disappointed that they weren't there to accept the award in person, they didn't show it. Don Henley told the LA Times, "The whole idea of a contest to see who is best just doesn't appeal to us."
Except for as the way I've lived my entire life.
Yes. Poor Andy Williams. This was like a year or two after Stevie Wonder won the Grammy, and he wasn't there to accept it, so he had to be beamed in via satellite. And Andy Williams,
yeah, and he said, "Can you see us, Stevie?"
Yeah, put his foot in his mouth by asking Stevie Wonder if he could see them.
I just watched Whatever Happened to Baby Jane for the first time in 2 decades, and did you ever hear about the Oscar thing with that?
No. Is that the feud with
Yeah, it's Joan Crawford and
Betty Davis?
Yeah, and so Betty Davis was nominated, and Anne Bancroft won in '63.
Of The Miracle Worker, yeah.
And Joan Crawford accepted Anne Bancroft's Oscar as a you to her, as you to Betty Davis, and Betty Davis was furious about it. Yeah, she never forgave her for that. Back to Hotel California. Rolling Stone has permanently placed it somewhere on their ever-changing 500 greatest songs of all time list. It's been named one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. The album has been certified 26 times platinum in the U.S., has sold over 32 million copies worldwide. Not even their best-selling record. Again, that would be the greatest hits. Good Lord.
That will always just be the most random choice for a best-selling album of all time in the United States. Eagles' greatest hits, 71 to 75. You know what? It's just every song on it. Hotel California is an epic song.
Yeah.
Thriller is an epic song. All the songs on their greatest hits are just taken individually. I'm just kind of I guess it's just, it was easy and accessible. And I don't understand how they had that kind of juice to be the best-selling album in the United States history.
People love taking it easy.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh man, I thought I was listening to Joe Walsh earlier, and I forgot my all-time favorite lyric of his from "Life's Been Good to Me," where he says, "They say I'm lazy, but it takes up all my time."
Despite all of these plaudits surrounding Hotel California, the album failed to earn them critical cred from the rock bible of the era, Rolling Stone. The Eagles were a favorite target for the publication. One review of a 1977 show read in part, "The Eagles flaunt no athletic grace. If anything, they loiter on stage." But critic Charles M. Young went too far in the Rolling Stone issue dated September 8th, 1977. He included this small, seemingly innocuous line in the random notes section of the magazine, criticizing the amateur softball team made up of the Eagles and their organization. The Eagles, you have to understand, were big fans of softball because they felt it helped them relieve their tensions. Glenn Frey said at the time, "If we can yell at each other on the baseball field, we don't yell at each other in the studio." this probably was not true. And my guess is this goes a long way in explaining why music journalists had an inherent dislike of the Eagles. It goes back to the old geeks versus jocks thing. Everything goes back to high school. Anyway, after referencing Joe Walsh's new solo album, Rolling Stone journalist Charles M. Young wrote in his little random notes column, the Eagles, on their first vacation in 3 years, seem more interested in finding a softball team they can beat, having lost in recent weeks to teams fielded by Andrew Gold, a.k.a. the guy who sang the Golden Girls theme, Thank You for Being a Friend, Jimmy Buffett, employees of several San Francisco radio stations, and their own road crew. Glenn Frey, you can insult Glenn Frey's stage presence, you can insult Glenn Frey's songs, you can insult a lot about Glenn Frey, but you cannot insult Glenn Frey's softball skills. So he took this criticism personally. And he wrote a furious letter to the editors of Rolling Stone clarifying, what you have failed to mention is that the Eagles won 2 out of 3 games against Jimmy Buffett. Anytime you pencil-pushing desk jockeys want to put on your spikes, we'll kick your ass too.
Oh, shut up. God, it's so petty. It's a f***ing baseball game, dude. You sold 32 million albums. You were red-assed about Rolling Stone, saying that you were more interested in softball, and crowing about beating Jimmy Buffett as some kind of a trump card in that. Not like, I fist fought, Jackie Wilson, who was like a boxer. You beat Jimmy Buffett in softball. That doesn't make you like an alpha male. And getting red-assed about it makes you so much more beta. Oh, not to speak ill of the dead.
Well, Glenn Frey challenged the staff at Rolling Stone to a softball match, and the staff at Rolling Stone accepted the challenge. The showdown took place the following May in 1978 at Dedeaux Field on the campus of the University of Southern California, and the stakes were that the loser would pay $5,000 to UNICEF, so at least it was all for a good cause. Yeah. The Eagles team had the band themselves, with Don Henley as the pitcher, naturally, and their roadies and various members of their tour crew, and the Rolling Stone team, who were called the Gonzos, appropriately enough, had writers like Cameron Crowe, Ben Fong Torres, and Charles M. Young, the guy who set off the whole rivalry in the first place. Jan Wenner, the Rolling Stone editor and owner, flew in his staff all the way from New York to L.A., and the Eagles, of course, had the hometown advantage. The bleachers were packed with fans like Chevy Chase, Joni Mitchell, and California Governor Jerry Brown, who apparently had nothing better to do that day. The Rolling Stone writers thought, he's a politician. Jerry Brown's going to be neutral about this, but since the Eagles defined California so strongly, Jerry Brown was very blatantly on the band's side in this game. And Charles M. Young said, I felt like I was walking into the Roman Colosseum and was about to be eaten by lions when I walked onto the field. My favorite part about all this is that before the game started, a voice came over the loudspeaker and said, ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the national anthem. And then they played Life in the Fast Lane. The Eagles, as you can probably believe, were predictably cutthroat for this game. They wore metal cleats, which riled up the Rolling Stone team to no end. Jan Wenner yelled to Irving Azoff, the Eagles manager, someone might get hurt. Irving Azoff replied, how exciting. He also wore a jersey that read, Jan Wenner is tragically hip, which barely counts as trash talk, but okay. I don't even really know what that means.
Is that where the band got their name?
No, I think that was an expression.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. The Eagles crushed the Gonzos 15-8. Yeah, wow, that's pretty bad. And as Don Henley and Glenn Frey wrote in a letter to the magazine a few weeks after the game, in the end, it was the errors that cost Rolling Stone the game. Their first error was to call the Eagles sissies in the random notes section.
Which they didn't do. He just said they cared more about softball than making a record or some shit like that.
Which, honestly, this whole event bears that out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my God. What tremendous asshole.
Well, the Eagles won the game because their organization was a well-oiled machine. They are no strangers to physical prowess, especially on the road. And this is partially because Don Henley ensured that the roadies were toned by forcing them to lug his mattress around from tour stop to tour stop. This is one of my favorite Eagles anecdotes ever. The Eagles' head electrician, a guy by the name of Joe Barry, told author Mark Elliott in his book To the Limit, The Untold Story of the Eagles, Don Henley insisted on having a king-size bed and mattress available at all times, which the crew had to drag around everywhere. The tour seamstress made a special cover for it with handles to make it easier to pack in the truck every night. It was Don's bed. It went everywhere. And Don Henley defended himself in later years by saying that this was crucial for his drumming, which, given what's going on with Phil Collins these days, I guess seems fair. Drummers have notoriously temperamental backs. Don Henley explained to Modern Drummer, I used to have to hold my body in such a position that my spine got out of alignment. Between playing the drums and keeping my mouth in front of the microphone, it really twisted my whole body. I got to a point in the 70s where I literally could not sleep. He added to Mark Elliott, hotel mattresses are awful. The worst damn thing in the room.
Bitch. Levon Helm had f***ing cancer and he got back behind the kit.
The best part of all this, according to the tour's electrician Joe Barry, the mattress, quote, never once got used because no hotel would allow us to bring it in. I'm guessing, I don't know, a bed bug's concern? I mean, I'm not sure which of the many reasons they chose not to allow this mattress in. In addition to this expenditure, Glenn Frey also supposedly brought along his tennis coach on this tour. And there were also times when Don Henley would squire his girlfriend Stevie Nicks around in a Learjet. The expression at the time among the alpha males of the Eagles was love 'em and lear 'em, which I hate. Don Felder, poor Don Felder, resented all of this because apparently all these expenses were paid for evenly by the group.
Oh, that's so bad. Someone again, the guy being like, we get a lot more done if people didn't care about credit, but also the entire band is responsible for my bed that will be carted with us that I will never use.
That's pretty good. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Hotel California's popularity even caught the eyes of Hollywood, notably the eyes belonging to Julia Phillips, the first female producer to win an Oscar. In 1977, she was coming off of hits like The Sting and Taxi Driver, with her latest project, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, poised to continue the streak. Phillips died in 2002, but she wrote a 1991 memoir called You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again. And she explained that she had this project kicking around called The Third Man Through the Door. I was unable to find anything else about this other than in her book. The Third Man Through the Door is something Sam Peckinpah said about Westerns, where he said that's the character, there's the bad guy or the hero, and then the sidekick or the B guy, and then the third guy through the door is the guy who holds the door and usually dies, and he doesn't have a name. And he said, I wanted to make films about the third man through the door. And so this thing Phillips was envisioning was this crazy like meta narrative about like the movie industry and itself and myth making, blah, blah, blah. And she got in touch with Irving Azoff for a preliminary meeting and explained this to him. And she wrote in her book that he said, I don't have the vaguest idea of what you have in mind, but you seem like a crazy creative person. Let me put this together. The 70s. Phillips, like some of the band, it must be pointed out, had a prodigious cocaine habit. And she recalled the meeting with the band at her Beverly Hills home, and she said she brought out a big pile of coke. She said, everyone but Irving partakes throughout. I do my riff. Don Henley seems bright and responsive. I get kind of hung up on his ears, though, which stick out. I love that. He probably read that and seethed for days afterwards. A recalcitrant Glenn Frey does a lot of blow and seems angry about it. The 70s. They seem sparked by the idea, but then everyone except Irving is pretty lit by the blow. They agree to think about it. In the Mark Elliott Eagles book, Henley recalled his version of the same meeting. Both Glenn and I remember that day quite vividly. We'd gone to her house reluctantly. We'd already had some bad experiences with movie people. They always thought we should be excited or flattered because they wanted to make movies out of our songs. In fact, we really didn't want anything to do with it. We were pretty sure they'd take our songs and ruin them. We knew enough about the film business to know that you'd have to relinquish all control and that it's somebody else's vision, just like rock videos are today. Okay. Coke, Henley continued, was at the peak of its popularity in Hollywood, and Phillips was in the process of flaming out her career on it. We sat there, polite, but not terribly friendly. We were too wary to be friendly. In an effort to loosen us up, she dragged out this huge ashtray filled with a mound of Coke. She offered us some, and we said no. We didn't know her that well, and it was a business meeting. Afterwards, Azoff gave her the brush off, and in short order, she was fired from Close Encounters and wound up living with her drug dealer, in her words, to cut out the middleman. But the project was probably ill-fated from the start. As someone close to the band told Elliot for the book, the band didn't really want to see Hotel California made into a movie. They were suspicious of the film business. After all, that was what Hotel California was about. To that end, the band has infrequently allowed their music to appear in TV shows or movies, and consequently, one of the best-known covers of the song is their version of the song that appears in The Big Lebowski, which is Gypsy King's flamenco rendition.
Oh, yeah.
Which is hilarious because that film obviously gives us the iconic line, "I've had a rough night, and I hate the Eagles." Other notable covers came from the British electronic duo The Orb, whose version charted at number 62 in the UK in 1990. Great band name. Love a band just called The Orb. A Hawaiian artist named Mike Piranha, who wrote a parody called Hotel Honolulu, satirizing the overdevelopment, crime, and other issues in Oahu. The song became a local hit in Hawaii in 1998. And one of the most famous and recent ones is Frank Ocean released a song that samples the entire instrumental track of Hotel California, which must be said is a pretty lazy way of sampling stuff, on his seminal mixtape Nostalgia Ultra in 2011. The song was called American Wedding, and Don Henley, who hates sampling and rap, threatened Ocean with a lawsuit for copyright infringement. I found out what he said about Frank Ocean.
Oh, what do you say?
I thought he was a talentless little prick.
Oh. Any more? I mean, the thought seems to imply, but...
Nope. Again, like, I get it. It's a pretty egregious sample. He said you can't rewrite the lyrics to somebody else's songs, record it, and put it on the internet. Some of these young kids have grown up in a world that doesn't understand or respect copyright material or intellectual property. They look at songs as interactive playthings.
Okay, sure. I would have accepted that explanation had he not used such soulless terms like intellectual copyright and like songs are my children, like that kind of description. I would be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, songs are playthings. It's the folk music, dude. Like jazz. Like off, you little. Oy.
Well, the best thing or the worst thing to make up, choice is yours about the song Hotel California is that it basically spelled the end of the Eagles. Bassist and founding member Randy Meisner quit the band formally in 1977, citing exhaustion. In truth, he was just really not cut out for life with Henley and Frey. Simply put, he wasn't, as Joe Walsh put it, an alpha. There's this heartbreaking vintage interview with him back in the 70s in the History of the Eagles documentary where he says, "All I want to see is five guys happy playing together." Narrator voice. That was not going to happen in the Eagles. To use the Godfather law of interpersonal dynamics, I always saw Randy as the Fredo to Glenn's Sonny. He's loud, quick-tempered, the nominal leader, not afraid to look like a jerk. And Don Henley's Michael, just the cold fury.
It's a great side-by-side image is Al Pacino as Michael Corleone and Don Henley's punchable little face.
But Randy Meisner, he just wasn't cut out for this. Confrontations were really hard for him. And he felt that as soon as the band started all taking separate limos, the camaraderie was lost. In addition to the strain of living out of a suitcase, Randy was also coping with the collapse of his marriage, which he did by partying. And his major discomfort about touring with the Eagles really concerned the song Take It to the Limit, which features his soaring falsetto. It's really beautiful. The song became an instant staple in the Eagles set and served as their concert encore. And this moment in the spotlight just didn't sit well with Randy. He wasn't cut out for it. He was just fundamentally a shy, humble guy, and the pressure of having to do this solo spot really wore on him. And he just dreaded it. He was always terrified that he wasn't going to be able to hit that high note and let everyone down. And if you've heard that high note, it's pretty screaming. That's a very real concern. So all this anxiety came to a head at a gig in Knoxville in June 1977 after 11 straight months on the road.
That's
so
insane.
No wonder they were a little fried. Yeah. There are differing accounts as to what happened exactly. According to Glenn Frey and Don Henley, Randy had been out with some ladies and a bottle of vodka the night before, and his voice was pretty shot by the time they were ready to perform. According to Randy, his ulcer was acting up, and he had a bad case of the flu. Aww. Either way, right before the show, Randy told the tour manager that he wasn't well enough to do his big spotlight moment and wanted Take It to the Limit removed from the set list. Glenn Frey learns of this, and he's unhappy, to say the least. I feel like he's fundamentally unhappy. He wants Randy to provide that big encore moment. He tells him, there's people in the audience who've been waiting for years to see you do this song. This is our big moment. It's our big encore. We can't let them down. Randy doesn't want to do it. This all results in a backstage scuffle with Randy throwing Glenn up against the wall, which is kind of nuts considering he's this mild-mannered. Again, it's like Fredo in The Godfather fighting Sonny. It's hard to imagine. Security starts to swarm, but Don Henley warns them off by screaming, "Stay out of this. This is personal and private. Real f***ing private." Amazing.
A white man yelling at the police, "Stay out of this." Like, talk about what a perfect image.
It's private.
Real f***ing private. Yeah.
From that point on, yeah. Who do you think is worse? Kimono and big curly perm era Lindsey Buckingham, or
it's definitely Henley.
Just definitely Henley. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
who would win in a fight?
Ooh, great question. Probably Henley. He would want it more. Lindsey Buckingham, at least to his credit, was like genuinely interested in like innovating and being weird, like Tusk. They like Eagles would never make Tusk. I'd like to think Lindsey could throw some hands, but yeah, Henley. He's too much. He would fight like Sonny too. He would smash you. He would bite
the garbage can lid.
He's a biter. I see that in his eyes.
Wait, did Sonny bite? I don't remember Sonny biting.
Yeah, like when the guy's holding his hands on the rail, he like leans down in his fury and like bites at his hands to get him to stop.
Oh yeah.
I like this metaphor. I like this metaphor as the Eagles, as
it fits,
the
right?
Guys from the Godfathers.
But poor Randy, from that point on, he was basically iced out, and at the end of the tour, he quit. He later said, "Those last days on the road were the worst. Nobody was talking to me or would hang out after shows or do anything. I was made an outcast of the band I'd helped start." He later added, "This was the end. I really felt like I was just a member of the group and not a part of it." And the band ultimately replaced him with bassist Timothy B. Schmidt, who, oddly enough, had replaced Meisner in the country rock band Poco 7 years earlier.
And his second bird-related contribution to rock and roll, as we covered, he also coined the term parrot heads for Jimmy Buffett fans.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. Timothy B. Schmidt.
Friend of the Birds.
Yes. Did Poco have any members of the Birds in it? No, I don't think so. I was Buffalo Springfield. Never mind. Would have been amazing.
A lot of layers to the LA music.
Layers there, yeah.
You know, I thought someone in Laurel Canyon who probably didn't suck is Jackson Brown.
Oh yeah, no, he seems awesome. Yeah. Randy Meisner's later years are pretty gothic. He joined the Eagles at their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1998, but his attempt to join the band on stage when the 2008 tour came through LA were rebuffed. He said, "I didn't get much response. I thought it would be nice to sit with Timothy B. Schmidt and sing Take It to the Limit, but they pretty much gave me a no in a roundabout way. I can't blame them. They have to keep their band the way it is." And his story, it just gets sad. What?
He founded the band. They have to keep the band. This shit makes me so sad. Sorry.
It gets even sadder. In 2013, I guess they finally did reach out to him to join their History of the Eagles tour alongside prior Eagles member Bernie Ledden. But Randy Meisner had a serious health scare that prohibited him from going out on tour. After 36 years of waiting, he missed his chance to rejoin the band that he helped found. And I guess somehow this health scare involved him losing consciousness after a piece of food obstructed his breathing, and he was in a coma for a time. And he also dealt with alcoholism and mental health issues, including bipolar disorder. And in 2015, I read that he threatened to kill his wife with an AK-47 during an episode of what I assume to be his bipolar disorder. And on another occasion, he threatened to take all of his medication at once. And I think he was placed under conservatorship for a time, but then his wife ended up getting killed when a rifle she was handling accidentally discharged in some freak accident. So all in all, Randy Meisner's later years have been pretty bleak, so prayers up for him. And, I feel compelled to back up my soft-spoken, gentle bass-playing brethren. And I think there was a time, our friend of the pod, real-life friend of the pod, Andrew Bank, told me about this wild story about how somebody went out and toured under Randy Meisner's name for many years, just impersonated him. Yeah, weird story there. There's a lot there. And to continue on the gradual, slow dissolution of the Eagles, we got to talk about Don Fingers Felder, which is a schism we've been foreshadowing this entire episode. Now, as with Fleetwood Mac with Rumors, the Eagles struggled to follow Hotel California and its huge success, and sessions for the album that would become their follow-up, The Long Run, stretched on for a punishing 18 months, just torturous sessions. And by this point, no one in the Eagles liked each other, but Don Felder was especially aggrieved. He was increasingly at odds with Don Henley and Glenn Frey, who he derisively referred to as the gods, hanging out in the back of their private plane, discussing the future of the band while everyone else was left out in the cold. There are stories about Don Felder being bullied on the road for wearing the, quote, wrong colored shoes and being told where to stand. Lots of foot criticism. Once Glenn Frey mimicked his walk on stage, and Don Felder kind of understandably flipped out and shoved Glenn against the wall. So, resentment boiling for many, many years, and this resentment boiled over on July 31st, 1980, the night the Eagles played a benefit concert for California Senator Alan Cranston at Long Beach Arena. This is a truly historic moment in Eagles lore. Don Felder was pretty apolitical, so he was frustrated about having to go along with Don Henley and Glenn Frey's wishes to make a grand statement. And then when the senator went around thanking each musician individually at a pre-show meet and greet, Don Felder replied to his thank you with a very curt, "You're welcome, Senator," I guess. Glenn Frey was outraged by his surliness and let Felder have it as soon as the senator left. Felder said in his 2008 memoir, Heaven and Hell, My Life in the Eagles, "Glenn found me in the dressing room and started yelling at me. I don't know if it was the drugs or the fact that we'd been on tour for so long, but he just blew up. Just before we stepped on stage, I turned to him and said, 'You know, Glenn, you know what you did back there? You're a real ass for doing that.' Glenn replied, 'That's an honor coming from you.'" The threats continued on mic in the middle of the night's performance. Glenn Frey recalled, "Now we're on stage and Felder looks back at me and says, 'Only 3 more songs till I kick your ass, pal.' And I'm saying, 'Great, I can't wait.' We're out there singing Best of My Love, and inside we're both thinking, as soon as this is over, I'm going to kill him." And there is audio of this that's you can hear in the History of the Eagles documentary, and what was said on the mic was,
"You're a real pro, Don, all the way.
Yeah, you are too, the way you handle people, except for the people you pay. Nobody gives a shit about it."
Fuck you, I've been paying you for 7 years, you fuckhead. Fucking kill you. I can't wait.
Sound technicians who feared that the crowd might overhear these taunts worked overtime to make sure that Glenn Frey's mic was turned down. But Don Felder said, after each song, Glenn would come over and approach me to, quote, "rant, rave, curse, and let me know how many songs remains before our fight. 3 more songs, ass. I'm going to kill you. I can't wait."
That's my favorite. Counting down the songs you have left on stage before you want to get in a fight with your co-band member. Incredible.
Oh, that story goes out to our friend of the pod, Dora. I know she loves that one. Rather than assault Glenn Frey, Don Felder asked a roadie after the show to hand over his acoustic guitar, which he then smashed against a concrete column backstage. An old trick he learned from bandmate Joe Walsh. Felder wrote in his memoir, "By the time I was finished, it was kindling on the floor. I turned and saw the Cranstons, the senator, standing right behind me, their mouths agape. A few feet away stood a stony-faced Glenn Frey. This had little or nothing to do with the Cranstons, but Glenn thought I did that right in front of them to drive it up his butt. Typical of you to break your cheapest guitar," Glenn told me after the Cranstons hurried off to their car. Afraid of what I might do if I opened my mouth to respond, I jumped into my limo and sped off. And as master of understatement, Joe Walsh would later say, "When that kind of stuff is on stage and you're in front of people, you got problems." Yes.
Don Henley kicked a fan out of a show in 2015 for yelling Don Felder's name.
Wow. What did he say? I mean, I feel like you need to give an explanation.
He was introducing the band, and as he was introducing them, someone in the crowd goes, Don Felder. And the guy continues, which is a curious assertion. Don Felder taught Tom Petty how to play guitar.
That I knew, yeah.
Well, that pissed Don Henley off. He said he had a security escort the guy out.
He's a scary dude.
I found out he just sued. One of his lawsuits was for the clothing company or Duluth Trading Co. for using. They had an ad for their Henleys, which is a style of undershirt, and the ad read "Don our Henley and take it easy," and he sued them over that.
Oh, okay. I mean that's okay. That would annoy me too, I guess. I thought he was like trying to claim ownership of the term Henley.
No,
which is only a matter of time. So, all right, Randy Meisner's out of the picture. Fingers Felder's living on borrowed time in the Eagles. Even the seemingly indestructible partnership between Don Henley and Glenn Frey is starting to splinter by 1980. And this partially had to do with their very different personalities. Don Henley's generally been portrayed as the more likable of the two, more personable, gregarious, and magnetic, whereas Glenn Frey was basically seen as edgy, attention-seeking, and generally less afraid of being seen as an asshole and making unpopular calls. Don, meanwhile, could just sit back and be liked. Someone who knew them both has said that, quote, Don Henley has extraordinary charisma and Glenn Frey has charisma, which is a great
incredible
line.
Yeah.
I guess they used to live together in their early years, and they had kind of an odd couple situation going with Don Henley being kind of a neat freak and Glenn Frey as the slob. So I just love imagining them as Felix and Oscar in The Odd Couple. Again, they were very different people, and then initially they were bonded more out of a mutual ambition than any sense of genuine friendship. And when they kind of achieved that goal of, having the biggest selling album of all time, that common ground was gone, and what little camaraderie they did enjoy was eroded by the constant pressure of having to bang out songs and lead the band. Glenn Frey would say, we had to worry about doing this or living up to that. We could talk about girls or football for a while, but it wouldn't be long before we'd remember we had to make a decision about this or that, or we had to get another song written for the next album. And Don Henley felt similarly, once saying, every minute I'm awake, and even when I'm asleep, I'm worried about the next album and what's going to be written on it, and how it's going to do, and how it's going to be accepted, and how my peers are going to react, and how it's going to be better than the last one, and how the record company is on our case about, hurry up, we didn't get an album for you in 1978, and it's not going to look good on our stock report, and what about the profit sharing plan? But yeah, for Glenn and Don, the tension that had kind of been present in their relationship since day one was exacerbated by years of pressure. And instead of discussing their feelings, they'd simply storm out and nothing would ever get resolved. Throw a bunch of cocaine into the mix and these feelings are heightened and the pattern is repeated for years and years and years. Something's got to give. The Long Beach incident, though, with Don Felder was really the end of the band, though. But unfortunately, the Eagles owed their label another album. So they decided to release a double album of live tracks, but it required a little sweetening. And as producer Bill Simsick later admitted, Glenn Frey's refusal to join them for overdubs or even speak to his former bandmates meant that they had to take a piecemeal approach. He's quoted as saying, I had my assistant in Los Angeles with Glenn, and I had the rest of the band fly to Miami. We were fixing 3-part harmonies courtesy of Federal Express. And the Eagles just were so done with being the Eagles that they refused to record new songs for this live album, even after being offered $2 million just for 2 songs. But yeah, they were done. As Glenn Frey would later say, we had come to a point where we were running out of gas artistically. We had gone from being a band that could make an album in 3 weeks to a band that couldn't finish an album in 3 years. And Don Henley would later come to agree, one of the few things they could agree on at this time. I'm very proud of what we did. We put everything we had into it at the expense of our health, friendships, and everything else. But Glenn was right. It was time for it to end. And this was 1980, and that was basically how the Eagles story ended until 1994 when they reconvened for the Hell Freezes Over tour, an album, and an MTV special. But that is another story.
I just found out they sued the actual Hotel California.
Where is there an actual Hotel California?
In Mexico.
Oh, wow. Twist.
Yeah. Yeah, founded in 1950, but changed the name multiple times. The Canadian couple bought it in 2001 and changed the name back to Hotel California and started using, obviously playing up on it, and they sued them.
And that feels like a perfect place to end our episode on the Eagles Hotel California.
Yeah, this song casts a long shadow in pop culture, and I'm sure Don Henley is sad that he can't sue every person who uses the phrase, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Because that's been used, it's passed into economics, which is really interesting to me. It refers to how the appeal of an attractive host country to foreign investors may be countered by the cost of exit upon leaving the country. So you can check out anytime you like, but you can't leave because you've sunk too much money into the country. They talk about with foreign investors in China. It's called the Hotel California effect. It's also used to talk about the negative effects of financial regulations on investment and problems with leaving like an internet service provider or a social network or cloud computing. People have even applied it to Brexit. And hell, there was even a clandestine operation named after the song by the CIA and special forces in Iraqi Kurdistan in the lead up to the Iraq War. So presumably the one entity that Don Henley could not sue. But my head grows heavy and my sight grows dim. So we're going to stop for the night. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Alex Heigl, and this has been Too Much Information, where we remain just prisoners here of our own device.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl,
with original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.